Welcome, 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 all internet and whoever. This is Reese coming at you another Thursday with the Mattriarchy. I am joined today by Tonic Mole, who I've never spoken to before,
Hello.
and everyone's favorite George Alexopolous.
I am the best George Alexopolous there is.
I know the standard by which all George Alexopoli are judged.
And there are many, surprisingly.
Is that the plural for Alexopolous? I don't really know.
I'm going to start using that now, I'll tell you that.
So when you have little Alexopoli running around, then you can go ahead and talk to about them that way.
There you go.
No. So.
I think I'm only using the mic on this thing. Okay. Oh, great.
That's cool. So, but anyway, so I thank you guys for coming on. Thanks guys for coming on. As per our usual, I've invited you both on here, but I'm going to spend the first hour picking George's brain about doing it yourself and all that kind of production stuff. And then Tonic, I am very curious about saving the world. I have all kinds of questions, but we'll have to wait on those. Let that anticipation grow. First of all, guys, how has your week been? You guys been keeping it real out there with all the craziness that is our modern world?
Yes. Mainly just drawing, working constantly.
Yeah, just try not to get the coronavirus, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah. So I haven't really done a lot of. I mean, I know it's spreading like wildfire there in the China, right? But what's its symptoms? I haven't looked into it really at all. I've been day jobbing it, you know.
I think it resembles, or in the later stages, resembles some kind of pneumonia-ish, flu-ish, something like that. But you don't catch it. It incubates for like 2 weeks. So people can be walking around spreading it and they don't have any symptoms. That's the problem.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's sprouting up in all these places. And it's like, well, everyone that person could have come across in the past 2 weeks might have been spreading it too. So who knows at this point?
Wow. That's sort of terrifying.
Yeah, and I'm old, so like it's like the bird flu. It's all gonna kill you. Over there in China, there's like this crazy population density, and we see something happen, and we're like, it's gonna happen to us, and then it comes here, and it's like, no, it's a completely different situation, and then it doesn't end up being as bad because America's different than China. They have. This is like one of a million of these things that they have going on at any given time. And we're always terrified that they'll happen here. But take me 2 hours to drive somewhere where there's another population of people. In China, you lift your arm, you knock somebody in the head. So
that's also because everyone's shorter, right?
Yeah. Oh my God, no.
I'm 6'2". So like I'm tall enough to be tall, but I'm not a giant by any means. But I still have lived my life for 20 years looking down at nearly everyone I know. So I have a habit of making short jokes.
I'm boringly like 5'9" or 10 or something. So it's like I'm kind of short to some people, but unremarkable.
Yeah, my wife says that you're just above average, and I'm like, I know, above average is still above average.
Hey, it counts. That's like Henry Cavill's only slightly taller than you. That's impressive.
Yeah, well then there's people like Doug Tenaple, who's a legitimate giant.
Yeah.
So George, you are in the middle of working on your third issue of Mary Sue.
Yes, sir. Well, actually, it's 3, 4, and 5, but I'm trying to figure out how to best present that. Yeah.
So are you wanting to stick with the single issue format?
I don't know. The way that the story is presenting itself, All right. So one of the complaints with issues 1 and 2 was that issue 1 was really boring. Not boring, but there was no action in it. And then issue 2 had tons of action. And one of the problems with that is that they were never supposed to, I guess. I shouldn't have split them. They were supposed to be one story, but I couldn't figure out a way to print them together. So I had to separate them as issues. So my thing is now it's like, there's no prescription for how often a fight has to happen, let's say.
Right.
But I also want to present the next chunk of books in a way that'll be very satisfying to read. And in order to create, let's say, satisfying action, I like to do a lot of setup first.
Right.
So I've been wrestling with how to best present that. And I think I figured it out, but it's going to be like 90 something pages.
Yeah,
And
that's beyond what is reasonable for saddle stitching.
yeah, although today on Twitter I posted a couple of pictures of a cute little way to saddle stitch and fold them into a paperback. It's a little trick that I'm going to be experimenting with. If worst case scenario, I'll just split up the issues again or combine them into a single volume. Who knows? But the important thing is that I want whoever orders the books to get a satisfying experience. And unfortunately, this time that means it's going to have to be more pages than last time. And I've been sort of struggling these past few weeks to sort of, I don't want it to be too expensive, but I also have to find a way to live as I work on it. So
Right.
I'm trying to find that sweet spot.
Well, that's one of those things where, I mean, especially with you doing this as a career. I know a lot of us that are out there, it's something sort of like a hobby.
Yeah.
It's that border between a hobby and obsession. But with doing it as a career, it kind of depends on being able to have some sort of steady cash flow. Because, bills got to come in, that whole thing. If you don't have those regular infusions, it makes it difficult to make a living at it.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about what role you're taking on in the project. I guess a writer more commonly might have another job, as they'll pay an artist to do it. So wherever they get the money from, they'll pay the artist who has to work full time on the project. Otherwise, it's going to take 6 months to a year or however long it's going to take. And unfortunately, with comics, it's like a serialized medium. So the slower the book comes out, I don't know. I feel like the only way I can make a living at this is if I put out books as fast as possible.
Mm-hmm.
At least if I'm working for myself. I haven't done indie work for other people in quite a while, so that would be different, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking at the photos you're talking about of the of that method, and I think there is some real potential with something like that, depending on how the binding goes.
Well,
That's really not unlike how hardback books are bound.
Yeah. It's I guess to most people it would seem I don't know. Maybe like it's not the most disciplined thing, but I'm also told that there is a certain charm in the handmade look. Like it's not going to fall apart. I can guarantee that. And the print quality is good. I can guarantee that. So I don't know, maybe some people might be turned off by the handmade thing, but I'll experiment more. I'll try to make it look professional. I'll see. I don't know. Worst case scenario, I'll just split up the books again. I'm still experimenting.
No, yeah, I think it's all worth looking into.
Yeah. I don't know. As long as people are satisfied, I guess. I mean, most people haven't complained. When I announced that I was doing them from home, some people raised an eyebrow, I guess. But
oh yeah, that was actually one of the things I want to talk about. Not getting into specifics because I don't want to.
Sure.
I'm interested in shaming people or naming names, but
that's all right.
There was quite a bit of was quite a fervor of folks that were just poo-pooing the whole process.
Yeah, it was very unnecessary.
And the idea that you could do it from your home, and I think that's weird because your home is just another building, right? So,
yeah, I mean, some of the jokes were that I got the printer from Costco or something, and
yeah, and then the idea that you are bound just because you have a home setup. I mean, people used to, like I was saying, they were blacksmiths worked out of their home 100 years ago. You know, they made, you know, armor, and they made stoves, and they made, you know, repaired wagons from their home. That's just lived in their businesses. We're dealing with a paradigm that is, we're so used to this compartmentalizing of our lives that we've just accepted this prefab society that we live in, that people have like, it's such a mental trap to get caught in, for my sake. That's what just my thought on it. And,
no, that's true.
You know,
sorry.
I was just saying, you know, when I was coming up into adulthood and getting into indie music and punk rock scene, and just kind of, you know, doing it yourself, you know, selling CDs out of the back of your Volkswagen. I mean, that's your you know, burnt on the computer at the library. we did stuff like that, you know, my friends that I should say. But it was like, you know, the whole concept of DIY ethic is just something that that's part of indie, and I don't understand why people were poo-pooing it at all.
Well, at the root of it, I think honestly was just that I pissed too many people off, and they were looking for something to make fun of. I mean, we're adults, so at the bottom line of it all, I think that's just what it was. Because I guess not naming names, but one of the people I was arguing with was also famous for innovating in certain ways, and the people who were siding against me, I guess, or making fun, had no problem with other people's techniques to innovate, but they just wanted to latch onto something to, you know, oh, George is a poopy head, and then so really, because by the time I had announced what I was doing, nobody had seen the quality, and I was the only person who did print tests, and I knew that the books looked good. And some of the less informed people who were making fun, I guess, don't actually know how printing works. And
well, I mean, and that's something that I think that, you know, a lot of people don't know, and I've actually had questions about this. I've been doing indie comics since 2006. Our first trade, I mean, our first anthology. In fact, I brought a copy of it. This is our third printing on our first anthology.
Cool.
It was done on a digital printer, right?
Yeah.
And that's pretty much, you know, most indie comics these days are done on a digital printer in some form or another. The offset is crazy expensive, and the quality is not really that much better.
No, in 2020, it's almost undiscernible.
Yeah. Well, and so a lot of people don't even know the difference between the different kinds of print styles.
Yeah.
That's just what's available in the price point that people can afford. Because if you're not running less than, you know, 4,000 books, you know, offset printing is just not worth the cost difference. You know?
Exactly. Because I used to work with. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Before I invested in this equipment, I used to use a third-party printing service, and I used to work with them very closely. And I've asked them, like, what equipment do you use when you do these books? And they told me the types of printers that they used. And I was realizing, wait, I know how to use those, and all I have to do is be crazy enough to buy one, and then I can just do it at home. And it's not that I'll never use another printing service again, because it can be very, very convenient. Like when I did the Problematic collection, I worked with a third-party printing service because it was just easier. Like the file was already ready. They do all the, it's just easier. But I wanted to be able to do it from home if I needed that option. So I really wanted to push myself as a test to see if I can match the same level of quality. And, you know, it took a remarkable amount of, like, I just call it R&D, like a lot of wasted money and failure. You know, the colors didn't come out right, or, you know, I botched the printing, or I botched the cutting, or there's so many steps involved. And I made a lot of mistakes. I wasted a lot of paper and stuff. But eventually I got, like, I've used this equipment before years ago. And I finally got used to this equipment again. And I said, like, wait, this is an option. And yeah, so the real test was I needed other people to see it. And obviously the books weren't done yet. So a few people were kind enough to buy the prototypes from me, and they looked at it. I won't name names again. But they looked at the prototypes with like a magnifying glass, and they said, "Hey, these look really good." And I said, "Okay, that's the proof I need. This is working." So I gave myself the green light. I spent a lot of money on this crap, and the idea was that eventually it would pay for itself. I could still go to a third-party service if I wanted to. So there you go.
Well, and a lot of that comes down to like the how you choose to use your time, and that's one thing. Like I will say his name, Tyler, did a great video going over the project and talking about the aspects of it and bringing out DC books and bringing out other indie books and some offset and some other stuff to kind of do some comparison. I thought he did a great job of that in 7.5 minutes or whatever his video was.
Yeah, I was very surprised when he said it. I don't know if I heard it right. He said it was better than DC's books.
Yeah, well, it was cut better. It was cut better because and some of the it was a higher quality paper.
Okay.
So it didn't have the same kind of finish on the cover, but it was actually better quality stock. He felt.
It was funny because doing all my calculations, paper is actually the cheapest part of all this. It's the toner that kills me. So it's actually a very funny problem to have. A lot of people are talking about paper and thin papers and stuff. The paper I've been using is very easy to find, and it's very affordable. So I don't see why everybody else doesn't use it.
Well, and I think one of the things with that too, as far as the toners, is you have such rich colors in that thing.
It's funny. That's a trick. The color, I don't know if you want to spend the whole episode talking about this stuff. I'm sorry. I tricked my printer into doing that because you know about RGB and CMYK?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well, if anyone listening doesn't know. Sorry?
RGB are the red, green, blue, and they're the colors of light, and our screens use RGB. And you can get a wider range of colors with RGB than you can with traditional printing, which uses CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And that can fake nearly every color, but not quite. And so you get out of, I think, 256 true colors with CMYK.
I don't know.
256,000, something like that. But it's not the same as RGB. And so if you want to get true RGB color in a printing, you've got to use a $6,000 machine that uses a 24 color process.
Yeah. There's a lot of different tricks. What you have to do when you do CMYK is sort of emulate what the colors are going to look like. I just want to make sure I'm not talking over you. Sorry.
No.
Yeah, it's so like if anyone doesn't know, like really neon greens and deep purples, for example, can't be reproduced in CMYK. So if anyone's doing their first time color book, when you send it off to the printer, the colors are going to be all wrong and messed up. So you're going to have to do you're going to have to do a lot of color adjustments and all that stuff. So anyway, yeah, when I was printing these, I had to go through every page in RGB and then recolor everything. Not recolor, but like sort of emulate the colors, kind of mess with a bunch of sliders, and I had to go into a few panels and recolor them. Basically, if you look at the printed book next to the digital edition on a screen, some of the colors are completely different. And that's just because they don't exist in CMYK. So that was actually a huge pain in the butt. But yes, somehow, I jacked up the saturation a lot, maybe too much in some cases. But it seems that nobody has noticed any problems, so that's okay.
Yeah, people, and like I said, that's one of those pictures I really wish I had the green to get behind, because it's so pretty. Everybody sent pictures. Of course, I watched several review videos. Doug Garrett won't stop talking about it, and it's just so pretty.
It was lucky. Well, actually, no, it's not just luck. Like the printer, I had to wrestle with it so much, and that's why I can't. Some people are asking me what is the model and stuff. I don't recommend this printer. It's like that car, like a used car that you get, and only you know how to keep it running.
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. Like I have to wrestle this thing so hard just to get it to do what I want. I would replace it if I could, but right now I'm kind of stuck with it.
Right. So do you have your eye on George Printing 2.0 then already, or what's the?
Sorry, what was the question? Am I?
You have another model printer in mind for time?
Oh gosh, I mean, it's really the only limit is how much you're willing to spend. I mean, these kinds of printers, like I always say, it's the kind that if you go to a Staples print center and you just walk around, it's the really big fat ones that look like half a refrigerator.
Mm-hmm.
So those can go up to like $10,000 if you want to spend that much. I didn't, but you can, and the more you spend, the more features you get. Like you can get ones that do the stapling and cutting for you. If you're crazy enough. Mine doesn't. I have to do everything by hand. But yeah, you can eventually, if I want to upgrade, if I'm crazy enough, not right now, I could theoretically just buy more of these and go nuts.
Yeah. You have your own little shop at that point.
I mean, to me, there's no difference. Like if I have to outsource my stuff to a place where they have to do print tests, this is really why I bought it in the first place. If my colors are off, and all right, so I finished painting Mary Sue and digitally, fine, whatever. The colors looked nice on my screen. But then when I started printing on the actual printer, the colors were jacked. They were so wrong. And I had to go through every page and adjust every panel. And I printed so many bad copies of each page, getting each panel to try to sort of look acceptable. Like I had to stop myself at the word acceptable because I would have been tuning it forever. But yeah, if I had to export that process to a third-party printer and keep getting these pages back and they're overnighting me these pages, it would have taken forever. It would have cost so much money and it would have been so frustrating. But yeah, because I had the machine behind me, I just did trial and error. I wasted a few bucks, but not nearly as much as if I was doing it out of house.
Well, and one of the nice things about the setup you have there is you are set up for print on demand. So you can go through and get exactly what you want. You already know what the product is. You push a button, you get the colors just like you want.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
I think that's a huge benefit, and I think I think even in the conceptual phase, I think people are underselling the level of service that ends up rendering to future customers.
It's more. It was so shocking the amount that I had to spend at first that I'm still reeling from it. But I think in the next year or so, it's going to start making way more sense. So I'm just trusting that everything will work out. Yeah, I think it was the right move because I did a few calculations of like prints of how much it would have cost if I used a third party. And I think the printer costs enough, like let's say X print runs. If I did this many, then I could have just bought a printer for myself. So I decided I may as well just have the tech, and if it fails, I'll just export the job anyway, and I'll have this printer anyway. I don't know. It seemed like a good idea at the time. It seems to be working out.
Now, I got the Mary Sue, of course, and when it came in the mail, open up, I have no idea because George has been talking up this whole deal. He's printing himself. I take him out. There was no other book that came out that was that level. Like, it was ridiculous because I was like, well, I cut George some slack, he's spent learning the new method, whatever he's doing, but there was no slack. It was ridiculous. And I was like, I don't know if George is going to go bankrupt selling these to us, but I don't care because the highest quality thing that came out that I got last year. I mean, it's ridiculous. And the price, was just the same as everybody else's, but yeah, the quality level through the roof. I was like, I don't know if they'll go bankrupt, but dang, that's a damn good comic book. So, yeah.
Thanks so much.
Through the roof.
It was really, I was biting my nails so much because, to an artist, right? I'm looking at everything with a microscope, And I'm like, oh, there's little imperfections here and there. But then I went to the store, and I can't remember if it was Tyler or somebody else who pointed out that some of the corners were clipped and not in the best way.
Right.
These little scuffs and stuff. But then I went to the comic shop and I'm looking at all of the books and they all have it. And I realized why it was happening. It's the way that you use a guillotine cutter. And anyway, it doesn't matter. But I was realizing like, oh, this is on par with whatever they're doing. So I have old books from the 80s, magazines that are in terrible condition. And even at the time, people bought them. And I'm thinking like, most people, I think, don't. I mean, I can never hit like Doug Naples' books, right? They're hardcover, glossy, gold, embossed. You know, I could maybe figure out how to do that someday, but I can't hit that level. But
you don't get to do that without a crew. I mean, like, there's one person could make that book. Because that's the kind of equipment Jostens has. Takes a crew to run each machine. It's a push button operation, but you know, you got to have the right number of fingers. You know what I'm saying?
Well, it's also part of the craftsmanship of bookmaking. Really fascinates me. So I'm interested to learn. Like I can make hardcover books, but if I have an order of 300 books, I can't do 300 hardcovers. It'll take me weeks, but eventually I'd like to learn how to emboss and do things like these books were supposed to have gold on them. Some of them have more than others. I was still learning the process, but I'd eventually like to learn how to master gold to make these books extra valuable. But there's all kinds of little techniques that I'm learning along the way because I can take the time to hand make each one of them. I'm like, okay, how much more value can I add to these without raising the price? Because I actually want to lower the price.
And that's one of the things I think is really interesting of the gold on that. Because I've looked at several people's reviews, and several of them, like you said, some of them have more, some have less. They got a custom emboss job. And that's one of the things I think is so fascinating about your project here is not everybody's thing is exactly the same, because you chose to gold leaf different parts of the covers for different people, just what you thought would be a good touch. And so it's like people are like, oh, I bought a comic with a sketch in it. Like, you have a sketch in gold. That's remarkable to me. That's such a neat thing.
I was stressing out at the beginning of it because I had announced not realizing how hard it was. Like, I've done it before. I've made some gold stuff, and I have family members who know how to do it, but I didn't realize how much work. Man, we tried everything. You can use heat pens to apply gold leaf, but the downside is you can't see what you're applying. Another technique is that the printers, the toner on these laser printers is actually magnetic. So if you put down, let's say, a black and white image of my face, and then you put gold leaf on top of it and you heat it and you take off the gold leaf, it'll stick to the toner.
Right.
And I was experimenting with so many different techniques. But eventually I just ran out of time because it was, everyone must know that the book was a month late and I was running out of time. So I was like, no, I'm just going to buy the best gold pens that I could find now. And I was trying everything to like keep my promise that there has to be some kind of gold on the cover. So eventually I settled on a good process, and the collector's edition people got more gold than the rest. But at the very end, I considered it like a signature. Each book, anyone can be sure I did personally touch each one. I made sure that the quality was as good as it could be. So there has to be value in that.
You have to touch each of them several times.
Yeah, I mean,
done with my stuff. We do these little ash can comics. They're just actually like on a color laser, right? And so I know. I mean, you saddle stitch, you fold, you trim, all that kind of stuff. Like I do that. So when people were talking about that whole process, I don't think people that haven't actually made a comic with their hands don't know what that time investment that is. For some, and that's part of my thing. To denigrate that is just like, dude, like, how much do you even care about your product? You know?
No, I mean, honestly, I haven't talked about it a lot publicly, but like the people who were making fun, they were really showing their hand. Let's put it that way. Because if they love comics so much, I think they would be very interested in my notes, let's say. And a lot of them actually, I think they ask through third parties because they want to know, but they also want to get away with making fun. So it's a very strange position to be in.
And I don't want to make the whole thing about all the bad feelings at all, but that's one of those things that to me is just I just have such a hard time understanding the motivation behind all of that. And not everybody who loves comics needs to have their hands in the ink. You know what I'm saying? But I can't imagine liking cars and not working on cars. You know, I can't imagine liking
swords and making swords, right?
Right, exactly.
I mean, there is anybody who makes comics, I think, would be fascinated to learn. I think everyone should be able to print their own stuff. Like the reason I got into this whole argument with people I won't name is that there was talk about ash cans being late. And I was saying, guys, you can go to Staples right now and buy even a low quality printer and print your own ash cans, and you can. The only difference is you have to learn how to trick your printer into doing what you want it to do. And there's things like paper size that are limitations. So then if you want to print on something like, let's say, 12 by 18 paper, that's when you have to spend a few $1,000s on a printer.
And that's the thing that's just crazy, too, is because, like, the reason ash cans exist, right, was because indie comics guys needed something that they could take next day to cons or to street corners.
Precisely.
Back in the old comics revolution in the 60s when people were selling them at head shops and stuff. And they needed a cheap printer they could make on a photocopier, and that's where the ash can came from. And so that's just like, that's
well, honestly, like,
to be down and dirty, and that's the thing. That's why they call them ash cans, is because they're throwaway items.
So it really, I mean, it was frustrating that it happened, but every time I got a taunt or something, it was just like, wow, there are more. They weren't arguing with me about the prints. They were arguing with me about something else. Ironically, they had nothing to do with. So it's like, what do you even have? Why am I even talking about this? So I just dropped it. It was so stupid. I'm like, I have so many better things to do with my time, like making a book. So I'm just not going to waste my time with these people.
So you are moving along to a future project. You're working on 3 through 5, and is that going to round out Mary Sue's story, or do you have things beyond that figured out or thought about?
There's more story beyond it, and that puts me in a weird position. So I actually want to start asking people for advice about this, because cost is the biggest issue with these books. So let's say her story, for whoever read books 1 and 2, she fights a bunch of pirates, whatever. And she didn't finish the job, so she has to go and fight them again. And that story could take a few issues, or it could take a lot of issues. And even after that, there are so many more stories that I can do. So it really depends on how this campaign does and how future ones do. For all I know, this next one won't get funded, so her story might have to stall for a while. But I'm able and willing to keep going. It's not going to conclude. I don't plan to conclude it. Like, there won't be a hard stop anytime soon. So if it doesn't get funded, I'll just like write the script. I'll release the script to everybody. You know what I mean? So I'm not going to just leave everyone hanging, but there is way more story.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. That's awesome. I like the epic story. I like the episodic stuff side of it too, but I think it's great when people have a big picture vision.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't mind limited stories, but I come from a manga background, so I really want to give people something meaningful. Like I like long page counts. I like long stories. The only downside to that is these books are so expensive to read, not just to produce, to read especially. So I really feel bad for asking for so much money, but I don't, at the moment, unless I start selling like 1,000 books at a time, I don't know how to lower the price.
Yeah.
I feel really bad, but maybe I can figure something out in the future. But,
Now you are working on a do you have a digital edition as well?
yeah, that's the cheapest one. I think those go for like $3 per.
So yeah. And that's still available, and it should be in the description. I put a link to George's store where you should be able to his Etsy store where you should be able to purchase all that stuff if you guys are interested down there in the chat or whatever. But and I think it's such a great thing that you've been willing to kind of seek out and kind of return that comics with an X, do it yourself attitude, married to I have to say borders on high art when you deal with the level of your artistry and that kind of thing.
Wow, it's very fun.
So,
I'm sorry.
well, yes, and I just from a visual perspective, I haven't read the story because I really want the physical book, but I just don't have the scratch right now.
I understand. I'm sorry they're so expensive. I'm gonna work.
No, it's fine. I also have I've kind of decided that I really have to be I'm kind of cutting back on my comic purchasing right now because I'm trying to put some money into a project I'm working on with Carl Tunes. That we're hoping to get done end of the year. To have done for 2021. But
yeah, I'm in the same position. There's so many books I want to buy, I can't afford them.
Yeah.
Like I really want to read Soul Finder and Earthworm Jim, of course.
Soul Finder is excellent.
Yeah, someday I'll read it. I know. Someday.
Yeah, I have Earthworm Jim, but I haven't read it yet because I've made a determination that I have to read it in one sitting. Look through it, and I said, "There's no way that I can appreciate this without taking it in at once." And I haven't had the time to sit down and read all the way through the 160 pages. So it's just one of those things where, okay, I'm working on projects. We've got a crowdfund book that we're fulfilling first quarter, all this other kind of stuff. And I'm just like, I can't take the time to read it, so I'm probably going to read it in April at this point.
I have a lot of like video games and stuff that I buy and I don't touch them for years.
Yeah.
But a fun piece of trivia is I actually worked on a couple of pages of Earthworm Jim, but I think they were altered because my style didn't match Doug's very much. But yeah, that would be fun to look through and be like, oh, I did that. I drew that chair for just a little while. But it was funny because I think there was a stick about that too, that Alejandro worked on it too.
Mm-hmm.
And he is so good. It was so cool to see that he got to work on it too. It's really awesome for like younger guys to get that boost from the veterans.
Yeah. Well, Alejandro's stuff is, oh my goodness, next level.
Yeah, he's a beast.
That was one of those last year projects that I felt Long Harbor was just outside of my range. I had to make a decision, and it was not that one, and I kind of have regretted it since then. But I also Bigfoot Bill. And that was kind of the decision, right? So, yeah. So that was that, and that was but his stuff is just it's next level, man. Goodness sakes.
It's cool because I don't know. I don't know if he's more interested in illustrations than comics. I interviewed him a while ago. I forgot. But if I've ever seen a guy that has the biggest future ever among like our age, like it's him.
Yes, his stuff's so good.
Yeah.
but yeah. So now the other question that I wanted, of course, we're talking about that I want to talk about the creative life, right? So doing this is you. I mean, last time I talked to you that you were like, I'm going to make a go of it. I want to be a graphic novelist, a comicer for a living, and so you have to have that as part of your daily process. So what does a work day look like for George Alexopolous?
Oh man, All right. So I wake up really early. I'm not a night person, which is why I don't do a lot of live streams. But yeah, I have my breakfast, maybe catch up on the news of the day on Twitter, YouTube, and then I go straight to my desk. And that's pretty much it until maybe I'll stop for lunch. Maybe I'll go out for a little while, and then I come back and keep working, basically. But that's on like a heavy production day, let's say. I take fewer breaks on heavy production. If it's a day like right now, I'm doing a lot of setup for the project. So if it's work that I can do remotely, like I'll take my laptop out and I'll work at a cafe or something for a few hours. Maybe I'll go for walks, thinking about story stuff. Like there's story stuff where I'm like adding entire scenes and issues, and I can't think when I'm in the house, so I have to go for walks. So production days, heavy production days, I'm just glued to my desk for like a week, and then I don't go outside for a week.
So do you write like full scripts, or do you draw from notes and then add dialogue later?
No, I always start with a script first. So I guess the closest would be a screenplay for like film. So it's mostly dialogue and a few stage directions if I need to describe what's going on in the scene. And then I do one draft of that. I wait a few days and then I reread it. I do my revisions. I do as many revisions as I have to until I'm satisfied. And then I turn those into thumbnails, which I don't know how into it you want me to get, but I
find it really interesting. So I'm a writer who does I have very basic, crude cartooning skills, which allow me to get my ideas across. When my words fail, my pictures can fill in the gap to communicate to a real artist, right?
That's actually very helpful. If the writer has a strong vision for the page composition, that can save a lot of time for the artist.
Oh yeah, definitely. But with it, I love hearing people's just their process and how they go through it. So, as involved as you feel like getting, go for it, man.
Oh, yeah. Well, the biggest and hardest part is converting the script into compositions, like page layouts. So let's say every scene starts with an establishing shot. You want to have a very zoomed out image. So maybe that's called a key panel or a keyframe.
Right.
So I don't know, let's say George is walking down the street. I'm going to show the whole street. Then I'll maybe zoom in, and then I have to think like, okay, as I'm talking to somebody, the first person that talks has to be on the left because of English. And then the second person who talks has to be on the right. And they have to stay in those positions because whoever talks first has to be on the left side of the panel. Or else the dialogue balloons will cross and that'll cause all these problems, right? So as you're composing the page, you have to think who's talking, when are they talking. You don't want to do the same shot over and over, so you have to mix it up. You have to do some zoom out, zoom in, horizontal, vertical, more keyframes. So you have to mix it up and keep it interesting. That's the hardest part, deciding who talks when. Is it a close-up, how hard is it to draw this panel? There's a million different things. That's what I actually just locked down for the issues 3, 4, and 5. I locked the thumbnails. So now basically you can read the whole comic right now. It's sitting in front of me on my desk. And it reads well. And my theory is that if a comic is drawn in stick figures and it's still fun to read, then it's ready to go into high production. But if it does not read well, then you have to go back and fix it while it's still in stick figures, because it would cost so much money to redo even one panel, and it's very frustrating. So in game design, we say fail quickly. You want to make as many mistakes as you can fast and fix them fast. But once you're in heavy production, that is not the time to be changing the page composition around. That's not even the time to be moving balloons around. I'll change dialogue until the last minute, but I don't move balloons around. I don't move a lot of stuff around.
No, I think that's a real valid point. I don't know if you know this. been doing webcomics for a really long time, and the story that's going on our Patreon right now, we're wrapping it up, but me and the artist who was working on it decided to do a little experiment and try to do the whole story Marvel style. So I gave him just a page by page outline. I said it's going to be 32 pages, and here's what's going to happen on them, and everything I thought would be just hunky dory shiny, and I got the pages back from him, and I was really happy with most of it, but I realized that there was gaps in the action that I envisioned and didn't write down, and so it ended up ballooning the story from like 24 pages up to like 36.
Yeah,
needing to add stuff to make the characters make a little more sense and everything else. And that fellow ended up having some medical problems, and so I had to have another artist come in and patchwork stuff, and that was horrible.
yeah. I've heard about the Marvel style of doing things, but from what I've heard of it, I mean, I come from a manga background again, so I'm very, in terms of the discipline of it, like, it's unthinkable to me to write the story as you're drawing it. Unthinkable. So I would think, like, I don't know, if I was running a production company, let's say, and I had a team, it's like the whole comic must be drawn. Like, have you heard of One Punch Man?
Yeah.
All right. So if anyone doesn't know, there's this artist / writer named One, and he drew One Punch Man really poorly, and it was an online comic. And then later he had a fan, I think, that was a really good artist who said, hey, can I redraw One Punch Man using my style? And he basically just redrew the comic using a really nice style. But the fun thing about that is it still was fun to read, even though it was drawn poorly.
Oh, yeah. It's great.
So I think that is the best way to produce a comic. So it's like, even if I draw bad, like, I could theoretically publish my thumbnails. And if it's well written, which I'm not allowed to determine, if it's well written, then it should be fun to read. It should be.
So I have as a writer, I have a little conceit about my writing.
Yeah.
Of course, because I think I'm good, or I wouldn't show it to people. But the other thing is having done webcomics forever. Every once in a while, I go back and read through my archives, and if I laugh at jokes that I forgot, that's when I believe it gets good.
Yeah.
It's been long enough. I've been, it's been online since 2006. I've definitely forgotten what I wrote in 2008, and I'll go back and I'm like, oh man, that was good. I like that.
Yeah, that happens to me too when I read my old stuff. I always have the position of I'm bad until I'm surprised that I'm not. But that's just sort of like my way of keeping my own. Like I could have an ego problem if I don't keep myself in check. So I think it's better to just always think that I suck, so that when I don't, it's a surprise. But that's my way of keeping myself grounded.
Well, in fairness, I think that may be how you became the greatest artist in New Jersey. So.
Oh man, I wish I could do an hour talking about that. I would love to have the opportunity to either prove or defend my title. I don't know.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know. It's never going to happen, but
yeah.
I'm pretty good. I'll say that. I'm not bad.
No, I definitely would agree with that.
Oh man. It'll never happen.
No, it won't.
Oh.
It won't. But that's okay.
Yeah.
So now here's a question, and this will probably be the last thing we'll talk about, and then we'll move over to Tonic, who has been patient, and I appreciate that. Or he's all like, "Oh my goodness, don't talk to me yet. Give me 5 minutes." Okay, you've got 5. But so do you have any plans? Are you going to be doing any like cons, or are you looking at ways to sell? Because I know you've talked about trying to sell Mary Sue in stores.
Yes.
That price markup is a hindrance to that.
Yeah, it has been a killer. I think 2 weeks ago ish, I started taking my book to my local shops, and when I told them that people were buying each issue for $12, they're like, "What? No!" They didn't believe it, and they wouldn't stock them for 12. But I kind of nudged them and said, "No, really, people really did spend this much online." And what they were trying to convince me was they're like, at all the places I went to, they're basically saying like, "There's no way this will sell for more than $8." So I had to like do like all these little tricks. Anyway, I tried to convince them because they do something called consignment, which is
Right.
Yeah, so they didn't buy the books from me; they're sort of renting the books. So if they don't sell, I'll just take them back, or I'll offer them for less or something. But it seems that $8 is the magic number, at least as far as retail is concerned. So this year I have to do some experiments, try to find a way to bring down the price if I can. Maybe that means combining issues 1 and 2 into a single book. There's like these little tricks. But yeah, to answer your question, I do have plans to try selling them in person. But I have to find a way to bring the price down because I think it's too shocking. The price is too shocking. I don't know. There's something about it.
I think that's definitely a factor.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, I mean, if you were taking those to cons where people could like open them up and flip through them and talk to you about the whole process and these are handcrafted and all this kind of stuff, I think you have a different kind of an impact than just putting them on a shelf at a shop.
I think so. Yeah, and
I think that's a factor because when you just it's even their covers are just they got this pop, man. I'm telling you.
Yeah. I'll have to figure it out. I think because I've never actually, not never, but it's not frequent for me to be at a table at a convention and see the people, like talk to them and hear what they think. So maybe if I can get, I don't know, if I'm ever selling books at a store, maybe I can sit down and like talk to people and, hey, buy my book, see what they have to say. But we'll see. Maybe they'll give me feedback that I can't get any other way. So this year I'm going to be exploring that, assuming this next campaign gets funded. I don't actually know what's going to happen. I think I may have burned too many bridges, but we'll see.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot more. I have this suspicion, and here's the root of my suspicion. I'll tell you the root of my suspicion. But I believe there are a lot more people in the indie comics world that don't say anything than people that do. And the reason I believe that is because Earthworm Jim sold $800,000 worth of comic.
Yeah.
Now, that's Earthworm Jim, right? But people have been lying and maligning Doug TenNapel for 30 years. And he sold $800,000 worth of Earthworm Jim comics.
Yeah. It's...
That I mean, some of that's people that don't pay attention to that kind of stuff. Some of that's, it's Earthworm Jim. I loved that game as a kid. Definitely a nostalgia factor in there. But there's also I think there's an underground of people that just don't talk about the crap, and they just buy what they want to buy.
Yeah,
your book is beautiful.
Thanks. I'm going to try. I think that's going to be the only saving grace of this next campaign, and why I'm going to take my time. And I'll go after this. I'm so sorry for taking up time. I want to make sure that because the story is such that it doesn't tell. How do I put this? The next arc would have been a full volume that's like 5-6 issues long, but I did a bunch of polls, and people don't want to pay, understandably, for 6 issues at once.
Right.
I have to cut it in half. So it's not going to tell a full story. And I don't know if that's going to impact anything. But at the very least, I want the art to be really, really good. And I want the reading experience to be really fun so that hopefully people who are crazy enough to buy these books will say it's worth it. And if not, then I'll make adjustments and try again some other time. It's not a big deal. but I'm going to give it my best shot, and we're going to see what happens. I don't know.
So
Anything can happen.
yeah, no, I think it's great. And when you get ready to ramp up, I have this tiny little show, but I'd love to have you on to talk about it and maybe try to get some moments ready because
Yeah, man.
I haven't read it. I can't attest to the story, but I know the concept. It's just the right kind of combination of high and low brow, and the art it's phenomenal. So I definitely think it's worth people's time to take a look at. So, but yeah.
It's probably going to be next month sometime.
Okay.
So I'll let you know.
Excellent. I love planning ahead. So, okay. Well, George, thanks for coming on. You are welcome to stick around if you want, but I know you said you probably only had about an hour. So
I gotta get to bed. I gotta get up at like 5:30 and get back to work.
That's early, man. I'm a night owl, so 5:30 is that's early.
I'm a day man. I'm a morning guy. All right. Thanks for inviting me. Take care.
Absolutely, George. You have yourself a great one, man.
Bye.
See you, George.
Bye-bye. Good night.
So George is leaving, and before we start talking to Tonic, I'm going to take a moment for station identification for those of you guys in the chat, in case you just came to listen to me talk to George and are leaving. Next week, I am having Mark Pellegrini and Tim Lim on to talk about their upcoming Common America campaign, which will be launching next month. So, if you leave, come back in 7 days to hear all of the Bunnylicious details. Okay, with that out of the way. So, Tonic, how's it going, man?
Pretty good.
I've never actually spoken with you before. I had you on. I've seen you in the chat over on Doug's show, Doug Garrett, and Doug's a great guy, and he talks about you. And so I went to check out your Twitter page, and I saw Saving the World, and I was instantly intrigued with the premise. So give us the pitch, man. Talk to us about your project.
Okay, so it's kind of like an underground comic, but a shared superhero universe. So there's a lot of the themes and ideas behind more along the lines of 90s, not really the R. Crumb that far where it's all about, social issues, stuff like that. It's more like along the 90s comics like Ghost World, stuff like that. And when I was a kid, I loved Batman, Superman, and all that stuff. But when I was about 14 or 15, The Crow, I think, was really the first thing that made me, think outside of the box of superheroes. And then it was Ghost World and Strangers in Paradise and Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, all types of stuff like that.
Oh yeah. That's some like rich 90s earth you're tilling in right there, man.
Stuff. And
Crow.
And and I noticed that these artists that were outside of that domain of superhero comics were superior in every way, but probably just too hard to manage to ever get them to work in within the bounds. And
Right.
And a lot of them are super rich now. A lot of people go, "Oh, I wish I could work at DC." It's like, for peanuts? When you got a lot of people I've never heard of Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, but they've heard of Invader Flippin' Zen. The fact that he did this bizarre comic can you imagine Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, today? But this guy's just making cartoons, making 10 times the money. But I mean, Eastman Laird, all that type stuff.
Right.
Back to my pitch. So at one point, I kind of thought about that merging idea because I was like, I'm the polar opposite of George, but in a way that's different side of the coin in a way. So I made my own comics early 2000s mainly, a little in I think in the late 90s, but it was like the worst way you could do it, you know, because I didn't care. I didn't care about quality. It just had to exist. And so, you know, I went to print presses. They wouldn't print my stuff. It was a little bit dodgy back then. I was much more into the very aggressive stuff. And
Right.
I went to a print press and said, oh, I got this. And they gave me a quote and it's all good. And then they looked at it and said, no, we won't print this. I was like, shut up, come on. Now, in hindsight, at the time, I had no idea. In hindsight, yes, I could print it today. But
dude, I can't even. I mean, like, I don't want. I'm not asking for a play-by-play, but you had to be real, like beyond edgelord edgy to not get printed by somebody who's gonna you're gonna give them money and they're gonna run it off and never talk to you again.
It's true. So, I mean, it was super justifiable. I don't know if I wouldn't today. It says I won't release it. And I did. I printed them and I just sold them to people. I put them at my local comic book shop and I'm a bit oblivious, or at least, especially back then, I was oblivious to what content. I was like, I go to a comic book store and buy our Crumb. Why can't I just go a little further than our Crumb and it'd be okay? But but it was a lot of that comic was about a guy that he wakes up in hell, and hell was like a metaphorical. Everything was a metaphor, but like gross and disgusting. So the idea was it had to be really far because I wanted you to go, ooh, that's hell. You know, I didn't want like the devil with the little horns and stuff. So anyways, what I ended up doing was much more bizarre. So I set them all out on 11 by 17 paper. So I had my pages shrink to 8.5 by 11. And then I taped them to 11 by 17. So I had a double-sided thing. I then went to the public library and sat there and photocopied this comic that was rejected by printers for nudity. And it was nerve-wracking at the time, if I recall. This was a long time ago.
So dude, this is so funny because I was just talking about making your own crap at the library.
I totally did. And it was like 10 cents a page. So
Yeah.
it wasn't cheap either. I mean, if you think about it, because it was a 32-page comic or something.
Oh, yeah.
But it was 10 cents for a 32 divided by 8, whatever the heck that is.
Yeah.
And so I photocopied these comics in the middle of the library. There was no room. It was in the middle of the library. There was this thing, and I was just like, hope people don't look. But I was still so oblivious that I didn't think that was weird, like that anybody would really care. Like, they'll be cool. I live in.
I'm a patron. I have a library card. What's your deal, man?
That's right. I live in the South in like this little small town. So why? I have no idea why I don't flinch at this stuff. It took like now I'm older. I go, yeah, that was. If I walked into a library and saw a dude doing that, I'd be like, oh, dude, what are you doing? That's crazy. But I did that a little bit, but. Then I wanted to do a big, like 200. I wanted to do 200 issues of my comic, and I was so excited. So I took it to one of those photocopy places where it's like a laser print type photocopy. Yeah. It's still like the blackness looks shiny a little bit. And I handed that same comic to them, and I didn't even. That lady just said whatever, and she actually did it. She went and photocopied them all, and then I just saddle stitched them myself with stapler. And
right.
So yeah, you know where George, he's like, it's like a lithograph, you know? And I think that's part of the problem is I am about cheap. I want to get my story to people cheap. I do black and white. I'm not a big fan. I don't do color. I just never have. And I want my comic to be quality decent, you know? But I'm just getting it to him fast, you know. This is a little drive-by situation. George is handcrafting these things. You can't, maybe it's hard to sell a comic of artisanship as a mass-produced comic, because it isn't. He makes a lot of them, but the hand craftsmanship is, a whole nother level. I'm certainly not into. If I can craft my comic like just the art, I'm gonna be like, hey, that's great. I didn't have no typos, but so yeah, I never did get to my pitch. So
That's fine.
We got that whole idea, underground comics, all this. But then, as I got older, I almost came back to superheroes. And of course, we're in the heyday of superhero movies and all that stuff. And all of them I complain about. But I like the idea. When I went back to superhero comics, like reading some of, I just read Batman, really. But a few of the Batman comics, I was like, they're all bad. They're always been bad. They're selling us Hostess. And we think something's exciting, but it ain't. It's nothing. I went back like Nightfall, and I was like, that's an epic storyline. It's like, in my head it is, but it's not drawn well. It's not actually written well. It's drawn out way too long so it can sell more issues. It's everything. They were not considering, how do we tell this story the most dynamically? Like, how long can we drag out Nightfall, Night Quest, and all these things? And so, and I've stumbled across a few, though. The Max, I don't know if that's a superhero,
Yeah, the Max kind of rides the line. And I don't want to today, but I want you back on because I disagree with you entirely about Nightfall. Yes.
Oh, yeah. I started a Twitter feud.
So we're gonna have to have a knockdown drag out about Nightfall one today. Not today. No, I have a. I occasionally I've had people on to talk about just different projects that were seminal that I thought were crap.
Right.
And actually, Pope, I had Pope Fire on when we were first starting to talk about Kingdom Come.
Yeah.
And Kingdom Come was okay, but it also ruined the universe. And,
there's a toss-up.
Yeah. And so that was the whole thing. So I'd like to have you on to talk Nightfall, but not today.
Yeah.
Move on with saving the world. Okay.
And so, so I got to this, when I tried to get back into superhero comics, it was the New 52, I think, was just starting. Yeah, no, that was not happening. I dipped out. I came back randomly. New X-Men, Grant Morrison's run. I read that and then quit. Oh, John, what the? Oh, how many shows do we got to do and fight about this stuff? So anyways, I just kept reading, and it was like so hit and miss that we were fed this. These universes never actually fit. The movies fit slightly better than the comics, but when New 52 started, especially, nothing made sense because I had hit and miss Batman up till then. I wasn't completely oblivious, and it continued, but Superman didn't. Anyways, all this stuff frustrated the heck out of me, and then when they were giving everybody mech suits, and I got all upset, and I was like, why do I care? I'm a comic book artist and writer. I want them to fail. That's like Bert, the CEO of Burger King, going, McDonald's really needs to get their stuff together. Why do you care? Everybody gets salmonella from a Big Mac.
That is a take I have never heard say, and it makes total sense.
And I just kind of getting back into I was never part of the Twitter comic book world all that much. And so it's only recently that I jumped back in. So half of the things happening, I have no idea what's going on. But that's my biggest takeaway has always been indie artists and underground artists saying, going, Marvel and DC really need to get it together. And I'm like, but why? They'll destroy us. They are owned by the two largest entertainment conglomerates on the planet. it would really be good if they completely neutered themselves. I'm rooting for them, and they are, you know, making me happy in that, you know. But so I, that's where my comic kind of come from. Now this has been in the works for like 10 years, thinking about it off and on, and writing these scripts, rewriting them, and just playing with it, and it organically grew. I'd like to say, well, you know, I really thought about this and what it should be. No, I thought, man, I like this, and then just let it flow, because I didn't picture it as comedic. It comes off a little more comedic. That's maybe naturally how I am. I think I like funny things.
It seems maybe. I'm just meeting you the first time, but it seems like maybe you like a good chuckle.
I like a chuckle here and again. So, which is, if you read my early stuff, wasn't funny at all. And so maybe it's with older age. It's like, maybe the world, I need to chill a little bit. And but this has this shared universe, and there is this overarching story. But my one thing is, every issue is a single adventure. There's an ongoing thing, but this is, I love Golden Age comics, old 40s Batman and stuff like that, because you got your money's worth. And that has been my biggest problem about comics nowadays, whether it's indie or professional, whatever, DC, Marvel, whatever it is. I'm not getting $4 worth of story. They're not giving it to me. I will have to read 6 issues minimum to get one story. And it's all about writing style, how you pace your story. You can fit it in 25 pages. 20 I would not recommend. You can fit a good story in 25 pages. And there is a place for miniseries or 12-issue runs. There's a place for them. But the fact that what I would consider a normal comic, 24, 25 pages, and you get a story, it don't exist. I'd say no, there is no comic out there telling a story.
Well, I mean, you think back to comics in the 80s when they went back after the crisis to doing backup issues.
Yeah.
16-page stories that were relatively self-contained, and then you get an 8-page story on top of that, you know?
Yeah. And see, and well, yeah, and actually I said Golden Age. Golden Age did like 4 or 5 stories in those.
They're all 8 and 9 pages. In fact, the reason we started doing our Lash Can comics was because we, as a group of us, decided that if we wanted to tell big stories, we had to be able to tell little stories.
Right,
so
right.
12-page stories is just what we did. In fact, this one here has got 2 6-page stories in it.
Yeah.
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 And I think they're both really solid, you know?
Well, see, that's every issue of Saving the World will have the primary story that'll be about 20, 25 pages. Probably almost always 25. And then there'll be a backup story that helps move the plot along outside of that primary story. So you get your story, and they're not where they're one-offs. There is a massive story that will unfold as these go. It gets more serious. There's dramatic moments, and there's all these type of things. And so I tell, it can be a 4 to 8 page. It'll vary. And they'll tell some sort of side type deal that keeps it going. And this first issue, which I've not quite pitched great so far, it is the introduction of my 2 primary characters, Kira and Nora. Now, there's a greater universe beyond them, and I just kind of drop you into the middle with these 2 characters just because they're my favorites. And
introduce us to Kira and Nora.
All right. So Kira is a comic book nerd like us. So it explores why she isolates herself from the outside world, why she loves these fictional worlds and stuff like that. So it gets, kind of my personal take of why I am have the hobbies I do. And I explore that a little bit. And at the same time, Nora, she's the skinny one. She's kind of the hipster type side of that. Now, all of this it's easier to imagine all these characters living in the late 90s. That's not a reference. It's not a thing. This is not our Earth, so there's none of that. I keep it and isolate its own little, universe. But, that type of idea. And they're going about their lives and they have their own struggles. However, an event happens. So one night, thousands of people across the planet disappear and wake up naked somewhere random. And this is a mild spoiler, but it'll be fine. So Kira and Nora gain these superpowers. Kira, when she exerts strength, her muscles grow to do whatever it is. She tries to lift a car, she grows big enough to lift a car. And Nora's mind thinks really quickly, so she doesn't move like the Flash, but when someone draws a gun and starts to pull the trigger, she sees them pulling that trigger in slow motion, and so she can start moving out of the way instantly. So it's like she has the fastest reflexes ever. And however, there's hundreds of thousands of people that this one event happened to, and it doesn't necessarily give you superpowers. Some people just was a pile of goo. It essentially rearranged their DNA in random ways. Sometimes you got powers, sometimes you woke up and just had an extra finger. And you're like, that's weird. And other people got superpowers. And so this whole world unfolds, and there's all the mysteries and all this type of stuff of what it is. But at the core, it's about Kira and Nora, these two girls who are working together to become superheroes. And I mean, it gets into that really pretty quickly. So by the end of the first issue, Kira is full-blown going superhero. Nora has joined her. And then by issue 2, they're the dynamic duo of Kira and Nora.
Yeah.
I had an original script that was 3 or 4 issues before you saw a costume. And it was cool, but unsellable. Nobody would get there. And I've read a lot of miniseries, a lot of those comics from Image and stuff. I read 2 issues and I'm like, nah. I'm sure maybe someday this gets interesting. I don't got time, and so I move on.
I had the exact experience with the recent Inferior 5 comic.
Oh, yeah?
Where by the end of the second issue, they still haven't explained what the hell was going on, and I'm like, I can use my $4 to buy 3 Alterna books or a copy. So, I think I'm done. So that was
and Unnatural, by Image, Unnatural. That was like that for me. I was like, this is a really good comic book. I just do not have time for. And I mean, that's like movies the same way. The Irishman, I'll never get around to it. I ain't got 3 hours. I got to draw. I got a letter. I got stuff to do. And so my comic is geared toward those people that want the maximum amount of story in this one issue. That's what they're going for. They're not looking for a Game of Thrones 8 seasons and then till it wraps up.
So is your universe one that is this the first emergence of superpowers?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the beginning of a new heroic age.
Yes. It's very complicated.
No, that's cool. Yeah.
And yeah, in this, as far as essentially yes. And so everybody's just learning about these superheroes, but there's all these bizarre mysteries that unfold that deal, and it is leading towards because it's not a parody of DC Marvel, and that was my major deal. I don't want I can't name a universe that's not basically DC Marvel, there's a few that I kind of find interesting and stuff, but overwhelmingly, even Image, we go, oh, Image in the 90s was great. It's like, yeah, Wildcats was obviously X-Men. Jim Lee said, I like drawing X-Men. We call them Wildcats. And so, certainly my goal, and I think I can't help because I can't be Marvel DC. it's inherently opposite of me. I wouldn't even say that I'm not trying. It's that it just, once it comes out of here, it's going to be all goofy. And so it kind of becomes, hopefully, unique, a unique superhero universe just filtering through my brain.
Yeah.
And so we'll see how that goes. And so far, you know, I'm not the... at times I have too much self-esteem. I'm pompous as hell. And then all of a sudden I go, I couldn't draw a stick figure, and I feel horrible. And you know, I think that for artists, there's a lot of toxicity online, Twitter and stuff. However, if you just ignore it and let, you know, people do their thing, there are so many people out there that can, well, it's like, for me, this all started, I went on a podcast with Jimmy, his brother, Peter Palmati. And that's where I first met Doug. And me and Doug just started talking. And then I met, tons of people off of that, you know? And yeah, it becomes like a comic book creator support system, you know? Because it is hard. Few of us live in New York across the street from DC Comics, or live in Los Angeles where all these, you know, we're isolated remotely, you know. The closest comic book artist I know, other than myself, is like an hour and a half away, and I don't know him, you know. The dude that does White Widow, White Widow?
Okay, yeah.
That dude. So, and my local comic book artist keeps going, you need to call that guy. Oh my gosh, I don't know who he is. I don't know, but that's my next project. But talk to the White Widow guy. But you know, that has been very helpful, knowing people and all this. And then, you know, so that's why I wanted to also reflect as much as possible. So I got Illustrator Monk, which I fell in love with his art because he did sketch of Batgirl, and I was like, this is the most amazing sketch ever. And he was cool enough to do my cover, and I got me and Tony Sizzle, who have been working together like crazy. He's doing a little bit in Saving the World. I think he has a pinup in there. And Ryan Foss, he I don't know if you saw it, but I've been adding pages, which is funny because George is maybe one of the most professional of the indie scene. Like, you know, he does things. He's actually a professional person.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, my life is, everything I do is chaos, but I read his stuff, you know, he gives tips, and I'm like, I'm doing that. But he, you know, he'll say like, don't add pages once you're started. Well, you know.
See, well, actually, it's sort of funny. I think they're riffing off it earlier, but Twitless asks in the chat, he said, "Do you like jazz?" And I don't think that's related to anything, but I'm bringing it up here because I think that's a thing, that's a factor. George's, they're all written up ahead of time. There's a precise formula to it.
Yeah,
that's not the only way to make music. And but you know, but
no, and that is the perfect. That would be the perfect analogy. George is like jazz. I am certainly an early 90s grunge band that know 3 chords. And in fact, at one time, I was one. So, you know, and that is, and looking at George's comic is this amazing thing. But, you know, I do think that I've been talking to a lot of people. There is a lack of that chaotic comic book creation. I mean, underground comics really disappeared around the early 2000s, maybe late 90s. And I think because when the market fell out, we just couldn't afford to do something. And then, you know, this kind of resurgence of indie, even then, you know, there's a lot of kind of mainstream orientated, mainstream alternatives. Kind of different than underground.
Well, I think a couple of things happened. I think that part of it is a lot of the indie, like the underground houses went corporate. Right?
They got cartoons on Nickelodeon, some of them.
Yeah. Well, and so you've got Kitchen Sink. You've got the once they did all the Kevin Smith stuff.
Oni or something.
Yeah. Well, Scott Pilgrim. Oh my goodness, right?
Right.
And so they stopped appealing to the same market. And I think the other thing is you had the appearance of the webcomic.
Yeah.
Right. And
yeah.
so some of the underground stuff went online. Right. I mean, that's where we started in 06, right? We're like, okay, we had two writers, myself and Chris Lawton, and both of us could kind of sort of sketch.
Yeah.
You know what? We're just gonna go with it. We're gonna put up our crappy drawings, and we're not gonna apologize that they're crappy, and hopefully our story is engaging. And I'm not sure if it is, but we've been doing it for a really long time. So, right?
And see, I've been talking to Sixth Scale. He just had his it was
Napalm Brothers.
Napalm Brothers. I can't remember words.
Dude, his thing looks so good.
Yeah, and me and him.
You're making me break my rule, man.
Me and him never directly talked. Oh no, he talked to Doug on his deal, and I was just in the comments or something watching.
Yeah.
And everything he said, I was like, that's exactly right. That's exactly. And there is a place for everybody. There are artisans. There's a place for artisans. There is a place for kind of mainstream alternatives. Like the guys trying to do a better version of what mainstream is doing, and that's traditionally that is indie. That has always been kind of indie, like Image Comics. They said we can do what DC and Marvel does, but dramatically better. And at least for the 90s, they did quite a bit. And but he's talking about underground, and it is that people talking about paperweights and stuff, and that is a thing. You want a quality comic, but I mean, come on, at some point who cares? Is the comic flipping good? Is this a good writer and a good artist? And we shouldn't. I don't really think anybody should be competing with Marvel, DC. That's not going to happen. They win. They just win flat out due to massive financial muscle. So and
I think that one of the things that is an issue that people don't talk often enough about is that, like, the reason DC and Marvel have the dominance in the industry is history and distribution. And you're not going to get into their club, right? If you're an indie guy trying to do something different, you don't get in the club. So we need to come up with an end run around that. We need to come up with a new, different plan.
There's a big club, and you're not invited.
You're not invited. You are absolutely not invited. And so that's one of the things that I think that crowdfunding's given people a different kind of an edge on.
Yeah.
Technology moving forward like it has so much in the last 10 years, printing technology becoming so much more accessible. You've got a bevy of small print houses that exist and have very competitive rates, especially if you're willing to do black and white. And I think that's a big factor.
Oh, and I think the printing is everything. A lot of people today with digital printing and stuff, they're doing 200 print runs, stuff like that. There's a reason I was in a library photocopying, because there was no digital printing, and the minimum you could do back then was 3,000.
Yep.
And it wasn't cheaper either. You're talking $1.50 a piece, 3,000 issues, and that was the lowest you could go. It just wasn't going to happen. And so even underground, there was underground where it was photocopy. That was underground. There was no other choice. And then you had your upper, probably technically, because like by the time you get to kitchen sink press and stuff like that, they're moving pretty good numbers. But today's they would beat a Batman comic with their print run. But back then, Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, issue number 1 sold last I checked in the early 2000s over 100,000 issues. And but anyways, I get off my point. But printing, doing 200 issues, high quality at $1.50, whatever like that, you know. Alterna does, heck, I think you can get like 50 cents an
Yeah,
issue.
they just published their new rates. I haven't looked into it yet.
I don't know. And yeah, because I saw their old rates, 50 cents issue. You know, the timing, like for me, I would love to do that. My comic is interiors black and white. I'm not a big stickler on, you know, I want the comic to be good, but I am not an artisan. I love artisans. And in fact, all of the comic book artists I admire are those type of guys. It's just not, you know, I'm not that articulate of a person. And so I think my original point was that, so you got this print cost down, everything is really primed for something. But there's other things constantly getting in the way. Kind of like now that anybody can.
Ironically, what's getting in the way most of really productive like change is politics.
Yeah. Oh, well, you know,
but not the politics people think they're talking about.
Right. Yeah. The world is, you know, politics. There's hierarchies of people, and there is tribes and all this stuff. And the past 10 years has been nothing but that. And the problem is society doesn't stay the way it is by being able to be defeated or to be able to be even seen, you know, forest for the trees and that whole deal. So the past 10 years, you know, there's all these people fighting and they go, oh, I'm sick of politics. It's like, this is it. The fight against whatever you're fighting that's politics.
It absolutely is politics. Yeah.
The only way to defeat it.
Like I said, I'm having Tim and Mark on next week, and I know we're going to talk about that because, I mean, my goodness, you know, My Hero Academia was a revelation that, like, so many people were so like real like politics, so they can't even see the fact that they've created a brilliant work of art that is entirely satire.
Right.
And that's a whole different level.
Yeah.
And
that's, you know, that's, I hate. People are calling a lot of different things the wrong words. For 10 years, they've been using wrong words. And, you know, I see that people go, well, there was, because, yeah, there's a lot of media, I don't think as much as people say, but, I mean, quite a bit. As mainstream comics, you can see some good stuff. There's some bad stuff in which politics is, that people say, oh, that comic's all about politics. It's like, no, there's no politics in it. It is pandering to a demographic. Now, this is not new to comic books at all. I mean, the Image was pandering to demographics. But it is frustrating when that dominates, you know? But people say, well, politics were always in comics, and then they reference, like, Frank Miller or so on and so forth. And it's like, yeah, a social commentary. That's what I want. I like that. I don't like a comic to just be completely bland and pointless. I don't like them trying to sell me a new pair of shoes either, or convince me who to vote for. I want like Alan.
Dude, I suddenly want to do a comic with product placement in the middle of it. And
Yeah.
Like, man, I really love these new Adidas shoes.
That's right.
Like, aren't they Adidas? No, it's.
And you know, that's exactly it. It's used car salesman type situation, you know, and people misinterpret it, and then they say the word politics, so then the other side fight back saying, well, there was always politics. And it's like, well, no, these are all different things. And everybody, and you know, and what really happens is someone becomes so, regardless of side, so triggered that everything looks the color red to them. And you know, there are, in 2017, I saw the most comics where I rolled my eyes, you know? But then, you know, eventually Marvel goes, ugh, you know, call up J. Scott Campbell, get him to start pumping out covers. And that was all everybody actually, they wanted. I don't care. I don't like mainstream comics. But for them, that's all they wanted. But the train can't stop. You know, one thing, ironically, it's no different than Marvel. Now there's too much money behind dissent and being angry. And so, you know, and all that stuff, that I feel like fading away. I mean, there's a lot of things good about right now that I'm seeing people just on Twitter and social media and videos and stuff like that, YouTube. Groups are getting back together, and I think everybody's just tired, and everybody's just talking again, going, hell with it. And I see that helping comics a lot. There's people interacting that would have never interacted 2 or 3 years ago, never. And everybody's just getting along better, and you know that wall is falling, and that will certainly help, and we can finally maybe benefit from technological advances in printing, you know.
Well, and I think one of the things we have that I think there are a few rifts that are not going to be healed, but I think that beyond that, one of the things I'm really starting to sense in the wind and in the water, so to speak, is I think people are beginning to realize that.
Yeah.
So they're going to stop fighting for people to make peace and just actually shut up about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's really what should have happened probably 5 years ago, or depending on what layer of the situation. People kind of got upset about things. I mean, and this is beyond comics, and just started fighting with each other, but not debating. There hasn't been debating in a decade, and this is.
There's been some on this show.
Yeah, it's right. About Nightfall, but
I'd like to say the one bastion of sanity on that. I like to claim that. I'm lying, but I like to claim that.
and you know, no, and yeah. On the big picture, yeah, there's been everything's reactionary, and it don't matter what it is. And so, you know, you wake up in 2019 and you're like, whoa, everybody's crazy. Like, they're behaving insanely because they've been reacting for a decade. Never analytically, just reaction. You know, monkey see, monkey don't. They do that, I say no. They go left, I go right. And so there's this, you know, and then, you know, eventually everybody woke up in really weird places and said, oof, I'm gonna not anymore. And I mean, I see that a lot. I see a lot of people that were getting a little goofy, just all of a sudden wake up and like, you know, and it's kind of funny because there's the 80s, the 90s, early 2000s. There's these 10-year segments where everybody behaves, dresses, and acts dramatically different. And I was like, it's gonna happen, and everybody's gonna be very shocked when the world changes overnight. And 2020 hits, and it's like clockwork. The society just starts shifting to a polar opposite, you know? I mean, the early 2010s were, or the early 2000s was hyper offense. How much can you offend somebody? You know, all the movies were like, whoa. Movie 43, I think what it was, on all that type of stuff, and South Park and Family Guy and all that. And the rebuttal was hyper offended. All of a sudden, everybody was hyper offended. And once you boil it down, I feel like it's easier to step back when you see it's just stupid. That the 80s were super materialistic, the 90s were super anti-materialistic, and then the early 2000s was this hyper offensive, kind of taking the 90s to the extreme, and then the rebuttal was, I'm offended. It's like, well, it worked. That was the goal of, I don't know what to tell you. And now now I see these people. I see people who were from completely polar opposites of the spectrum talking, and I'm like, that's weird. You know, just everybody's mingling again because, you know, it's over. The decade's over. We're moving on, doing something different. We're sick of fighting and stuff. I'm hoping that's the deal. And that's my pitch for saving the world.
So, in closing,
yeah,
viewers, if you want to hear a comic that is about everything.
Everything.
You're saving the world. So what's your production plan on that one? You're planning issues out.
Yeah.
Are you doing like a crowdfund, or are you going to be selling them through your Patreon, or what's the plan?
Okay, the plan is Indiegogo, February 12th.
Okay.
The first issue will already be done. I'm just polishing it right now.
That's 2.5 weeks, guys.
That's right. February 12th. And yeah, go to my Twitter. I'll be talking about it constantly. And my second issue will just start directly after that. Print costs are not horrible. The Indiegogo's primary purpose is to launch the series like future issues. In theory, I can afford just to print it and fail. But if I want to keep printing, I need to make some of that money back. I'll actually keep, if I just lost a little bit of money every issue, I would keep going for at least 10 issues, something like that. And that's the goal. I want to build up something, build up into it. And so I have my first issue. I'm just going to start my second issue right after that. And there's, I'm hiring guest cover artists. So I have Illustrator Monk on issue number 1. I have Sashi on issue number 2. So my cover,
that's a get right there, man. She's a busy woman.
It's awesome. And so I do, a lot of my guest artists are a bucket list. So one of the first artists that I come across on Twitter was Illustrator Monk. And I was like, man, that guy's awesome. So I got him to do my first issue. And Sashi, her art is just amazing. And so I bothered her for a long time and got a cover. And so that's pretty awesome. And I have, this one's a little further out. It'll be April or so. Me, Tony Sizzle, I believe Illustrator Monk, maybe Doug, and I'll probably have some other people come in. And currently, I haven't announced this because it's all agreed upon and going forward. But I like to have the art in my hand before I announce people, that working on something. But hey, it'd be fine. If someone has suffered through me rambling for this long, they deserve this. Bob Quinn, who is a current artist on Red Sonja.
Okay.
He's doing the cover for, it's a Western anthology. There'll be one of the stories already done, and it's written by me, and it's drawn by Tony Sizzle, and it's a reimagining of Red Mask, the old 40s Western comic. And I'm doing a reimagining of Red Hair, where I'm drawing it and writing it. And Illustrator Monk is currently working on it's Cowboys and Zombies. At the time, we were going to have, it was just a hodgepodge, so we were going to do Western and some zombie stories and all this stuff before it became strictly Western. So his was always bridging. And we might do a zombie next, and I'm not certain. His story might bleed over, and so he'll do the Western one half in the Western one, the other half in the zombie. But that's a real loose deal. We're just kind of flying by the seat of our pants just for fun. But yeah, and one of my only mainstream comics I read is Red Sonja. And so it was like 3 a.m, and I was talking on Twitter to Bob Q, and I was like, you just get that feeling like, now's the time. So I was like, hey, buddy, would you do a cover for me? And he said, sure. And so that's pretty cool. So that is a, wait, hold on, let me. I'm totally okay with the feeling. No, she's kind of like the Optimus Prime of that genre of style of art. I see other people with this, it's a super clean, kind of animated style, loosely, kind of like and stuff. But she's like the best of it. And so, it's a style that I love. I can't do. I do kind of, I don't even know what I do. I think I can't see it. Whatever I do, it's kind of cartoony. But yeah, but everything she does, it just looks amazing. And that was the Mary Sue, the back cover, I think it was.
Yes.
Like that is amazing, amazing work. And,
So good.
And so, yeah.
You covered I think the second volume of Flying Sparks, or the third volume.
Oh yeah.
The pillow fight.
I don't know. Oh, no. I think I've seen the image, but I don't have the. I don't have the comic.
Yeah, I don't have it either, but it's amazing.
Yeah, and so that is my primary goal. February 12th. I want to do bi-monthly. That is another thing that coming into the community, I didn't understand that people do 2 comics a year, and that baffles my head. I'm like, it would take me. I'd be dead by the time I finish my story. I have a lot to. My comic is a 20-issue run. I want to complete it quickly because I have other entire universes I want to, explore. And so, yeah, when I saw that, like, oh, you're talking about having time to read comics. I don't have a lot. I don't get to read a lot, but I don't have to because I have. Oh, I bet I have 10 or 11 comics that, like Indiegogo, Kickstarter or something I supported, and I've seen like 2. And so I'm still waiting on comics to show up just so I can read them. And so that was a big thing I didn't want to do. Now, there are comics that are worth waiting for. I fully understand. Again, we're not Marvel and DC. We have circumstances that are just, it's tough. We couldn't do what we do 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Modern things got us here. So, my goal is bi-monthly. I want to move like a real indie comic or traditional indie where even Underground was bi-monthly. That was normal. We got 2 months to do your comic. That's what I want to do. I don't know if I can. I feel like it's totally possible. I'm not. Again, my artwork is streamlined and stuff. I can do hyper detailed stuff. I'm just laying off that and doing a more cartoon look, the speed of the one. But so that's what I
think it fits with the whole story. Like I said, the stuff the reason I wanted you on is because I looked at it and I said this is something worth going at it. And I love like alternate history stuff. I love superhero universes. I like shared universe stuff. I mean, with Ideal Comics, that's what we've been doing this whole time. Is like it's one huge universe. Our webcomic, which is all for laughs, virtually. It's a teenage. It's the superheroes. It's teenage superheroes in superhero and supervillain high school, right? Yeah. And I've been telling that story for a long time. And we've got at the same time we've got like monsters, we've got werewolves and vampires, and we've got urban detectives, and we've got space aliens and all kinds of stuff that's all part of our universe.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I totally get the idea. So I was like, I got to know more. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's really what probably the major. I like to nerd out on things. I build PCs because I like putting parts together. I'm fidgety. That's the word. I have to be moving. I can't stop. And so I work on cars. I had a 71 Le Mans and all this stuff. And so I'm constantly kind of fiddling. And when it comes to storytelling, I thought, man, shared universes are terrible. They don't fit together. It's all dumb, and they're not planned out. I don't like that DC Marvel has writers that hate each other, and so like they'll just change what someone just wrote. And Batman Year One, this amazing comic, was instantly trying to be retconned by other writers that were not Frank Miller. It was like, who do you think you are? He's Frank Miller. They didn't like that Catwoman was a hooker or something, and New 52 is no different. The next writer tries to retcon the last one. It just drives me crazy, and the universes don't fit together and stuff. So I wanted basically a condensed version. There's 20 issues. I have spin-offs that can happen. I'll probably get other writers if that's even feasible, because there's some characters that are cool. I just don't care. I don't love them enough to write them. Or maybe not enough I did. Some of them are like, a detective situation. Those are hard stories to write. It sounds
yes, they are. Yes, they are.
Really smart. And I'm not. It takes me too long to write those stories. Kira and Nora, they're generally it'll be a monster of the week type situation. There's a new baddie that shows up that's like them with a different weird power set, and and so far there's a couple of issues planned that steps outside of that. That is, them dealing with life in some way or another. But mainly it's that type of situation. But there is an intricate universe actually set up, and so I hope readers keep that in mind, because it might not be obvious in the first issue. The first issue is, this funny type stuff. And I think I laid a few mysteries in there where you go, wait, what was that all about? To keep your brain going, is this guy actually weaving this giant universe into this goofy as hell story? And yes, sir, I am. And so it's I'm trying to blend these. I do think the tone is odd, and maybe in a good way, that there is this funny comedic take, but while taking itself extraordinarily serious. But hey, that's the Earthworm Jim guy.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Hi, Doug.
Thank you for coming, Doug. This is the first time I think I've seen you in the chat on my show. It's awesome, frankly.
You had to check out the Tonic Mole.
I'm a huge fan. So as he can't remember what we're talking about. You're saving the world, the idea of complex universes and leaving those breadcrumbs along.
Right.
The thing I love about your approach to it, and you're just talking about as the single writer for this part of the story.
Right.
My wife and I just got done watching the complete X-Files, all of it.
Right.
Right. And it was really good at that, and then it wasn't, and then it was, and then it wasn't, and then it was, and then it wasn't for like the next 15 years.
Right. And, devastatingly so. It was good. It was, it's kind of like anything J.J. Abrams, for that matter, to where they would build up almost like they said, okay, this is the final season, and then the next season they said, no, we're renewed for 3, and they're like, okay, scrap that story, let's do something different. And that was like, that whole build up for X-Files at the beginning, and then the movie happened, and you're like, 8 gray aliens with monster teeth? What? The movie kind of jumped the shark.
And the worst part about that is Dana got abducted again with no mind ray or anything, and yet season 6 happens and she's just like, I'm not sure I buy aliens.
That's right.
I'm okay with demons now, but aliens.
And it was 5 seasons of us going, how much proof does she need? And at that point, it was like, okay, now they're just insulting me.
I know that the universe was created ex nihilo with less evidence than you have about aliens. I don't even question that.
Was it the 5th? I can't remember what season, but it's the ending is basically Prometheus, right? Where they find the glyphs and all this, and I was like,
that was the end of season 6, I think.
Yeah, and I was like, this is amazing, and then the next season they jump it. But no. So I have a whiteboard, and I lay out all my issues, and I write my stories kind of just. I come up with a little idea, a nugget, and I write that issue. But I then have all these things that has to happen. They are the threads that will, kind of go over the top of these stories. And I just kind of integrate them. So I have this kind of, I will say I'm more articulate when writing. That's where art-wise, I'm just drawing, making things happen. But when it comes to writing, I become very, very, that's where things get serious. I write a story and an outline, and then I'll do. My scripts are pretty crazy because I am the only one who have to understand them. But then, when I started to write for other people, that triggered. Well, I had to break them down into frames and say, okay, this camera needs to be doing like this angle, this stuff that'll look good. And I was like, man, that's easy to draw. Why don't I do that for me? And so I've actually started doing that, laying out my pages just I can see them in my head, so I just write down, okay, 3 long frames, and this is changes on this one and stuff like that, and I can lay out my page count and stuff. It's really helped a lot of I'm learning more.
Use a particular script format when you write, or did you make up your own? Or
I think I made up my own. When I first write, it's more like a novel, but almost entirely dialogue. The action will be 2 or 3 words. Kira punches bad guy, and unless it needs to be framed, I'll say, okay, far away, you see, or something like that. But generally, it's almost entirely dialogue, because it's my comics are pretty dialogue. They're not dialogue heavy. They are. I focus on dialogue. That's what most.
I can't imagine if Ghost World was one of your inspirations for this story, it wouldn't have a lot of punchy dialogue.
That's pretty much it. And even my art.
Ghost World was either, oh, here's a lot of punchy dialogue, or awkward scene with nobody saying anything.
That pretty much describes a lot of the style. If I could draw and write my comic just like Ghost World with superheroes, I love it. Not me. I'm too indulgent. That's what it is, because I'm like, this big boob superhero girl, she needs to be running for several pages. And so it's funny, because I come from this Ghost World thing, right? That's the total counter to that. But there's a little part of my brain, and that's what Saving the World is. It's as if Daniel Klaus sat down and was going to write a superhero sequel of Ghost World and had a brain aneurysm that made him an unrepentant pervert. That's the thing. I have this weird balance to where I like things that are flashing over the top while I write stories that contradict that. And I say that's probably it. I draw. I like to draw these exaggerated characters and all this type of stuff, but I write. I try to write sharp comedy, but with emotional impact, heavy emotional impact. You care about who these people are. But that's why I use the comedy. The comedy isn't to make people laugh. It's a comic. If someone laughs at a comic, you're the greatest comedian ever, because you're such at a disadvantage to make someone laugh within the pages of a comic book. I
think that's fair, because there's no timing. It's all written. The reader, you have to trick the reader into imagining the timing of the.
And someone can't. Terry Moore, reading Strangers in Paradise, he has comedic timing in frames. I've read it a million times trying to figure it out. I don't know what he's doing. I think he knows the exact freeze frame to make that timing work in our heads. Because I read it and I'm like, man, if I could learn to do that. But I use the comedy to make people to relate, so that you care of who these people. You go, hey, not like me and my friends talk like that, And so there is a little bit of. I try to make Nora and Kira talk like normal people.
Right.
So sometimes they might be a little problematic, They talk like nobody's there. And it's not terrible. It's not like going to get me canceled or nothing, but
it's not like that other comic you did.
Yeah, there ain't no. I'd go to jail. But no, and now it is. Now that would be another point. This comic was I want to be able to show this to anybody, pretty much, and so, there's a lot. There's side boob and stuff, but I don't show no nudity. Cussing is pretty limited, but mainly because the characters aren't the type of people that just cuss a lot, Right. I mean, Kira and Nora are kind of rough people and stuff. They're rowdy girls or something. But it didn't feel normal for them to just really cuss like sailors all the time.
Right. I get that.
And so And there's
And I
something.
have to say, I think there's something about that. Not to be overly puritanical about it, but there seems to be, to me anyway, an amount at which for a woman to swear that beyond that is just like I'm gone. I'm out of here.
Well,
Where there's a level at which it's approachable and real, and beyond that is just you're just trying to be a man, aren't you?
and I mean, and it really is. It's kind of both, though. There is that in writing, definitely. In the real world, everybody cusses like sailors, whatever. But when writing, a lot of people try to fall on as if everybody does just use the F-bomb all the time, and it's always when someone's trying to be gritty or realistic and stuff. And you can say the F-bomb and not offend anybody, ironically. You can't have someone talk how people really talk, We make jokes that are horrible. We are horrible people when Twitter's not looking. Everybody. And we pretend like we're not because we don't want to get in trouble. But the only thing all humans have in common is that we say horrible things when nobody's looking. I hint at that with Saving the World because I want people to attach to these characters, and you really don't see that much in traditional media and stuff. Everybody's like, they'll just say the F word a lot, like that's supposed to make them rough and stuff. It's like, no, there's worse things than curse words, and there's a little bit of that. Now there's two reasons for that though. One was I intentionally thought that. What if they talk a little bit like two girls that nobody's supposed to be listening to them? Another was I wrote it 10 years ago. Lots of things have become a problem that weren't 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And so when I was going back over my script, I go, oh no, that's the thing. And I just decided it's okay. I don't want to change it. It's what my characters, I put them in my head and I let them create. They become a real person. And they tell me what they say. It is not my place to change what they say. That was I didn't say it. They did. And so
and I think that's actually an important thing to point out too, because from a writing perspective, right? Our purpose, our goal is to create realistic people, characters that have thoughts, motivations, ideas, moral compasses that are not necessarily our own. And I think one of the things that comes to is that if a writer is too rushed or a writer is too lazy, they just write themselves into the story.
Yeah.
And I think that becomes fairly obvious. And I think a lot of the problems people have had with mainstream comics in the last 10 years is that they're just writing themselves.
And here's a great, it's a funny argument. I'm 38 years old, so this is a funny argument for me to have. But mainstream comics, in my opinion, if you look, writers and artists before the early 2000s were in their early 20s, if not teenagers. Bob Kane was like 17. One thing back then, everybody was at war if you were old enough to, so everybody was 17 or something doing anything. And so it was a young man's game for a very long time. And so the comics came off like that. They weren't the most skilled crafted, but there was a thing. It was neat because they were these young kids, these young guys' ideas. Money happened. Not within the industry. Ironically, the comic industry collapsed in the late 90s and has never recovered. It's made little bumps and everybody goes, it recovered. It's like, they used to sell millions of copies. And in fact, Jack Kirby, his romance comics were selling like 4 or 5 million copies or something ridiculous.
Oh yeah.
And then before he worked for pennies for Marvel, ironically, he's iconic for Marvel. That's where he didn't make any money there. Anyways, fast forward to now, and the industry's collapsed. And you go, well, why can't anybody, unless you have this college education and you have this #1 best-selling graphic novel and all, or novel before getting into the industry because they're trying to get a job writing screenplays.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Nobody's there to write comic books. They don't like comic books. They don't care for them. And everybody's there trying to get a different job. Well, that's not how any industry should be. It's kind of like you see a guy who loves TV writing a TV show, and it's amazing. But the guy writing a TV show hoping Hollywood sees it, he's terrible because he don't care about that medium. You have to care about it. And there's a lot of people, the age of people writing DC and Marvel leaped huge. And they were told to appeal to preteens. Now, I don't try to appeal to anybody but 30-year-old dudes because I am one. I'll look ridiculous trying to appeal to anybody else. And so, that's my takeaway is, they hired a bunch of these people because they want to get a screenplay, but they're trying to appeal to a demographic they don't understand, which,
Well, and the thing about that frustrates me, and I think that's definitely part of it, but is that I think trying to appeal typically to a demographic instead of just telling stories is insulting to the most part for your demographic.
Yeah. And now
there's an exception if you're actually writing kids comics. For example, I'm a huge Aquaman fan. One of my, I guess, a revelation that I had in the Silver Age, right? Aquaman was, excuse me, was predominantly marketed to 7-year-old girls because that's who was buying Aquaman, right? But it was also being read by 9-year-old boys. So they're like, how do we write these romance comics that are also action comics? Because that's what Aquaman was. Is it was fairy tales and romance and true love and saving the day and hey Star and also action and being a man and all that kind of stuff. And it was all this. And so one of the things that is most remarkable about this comics is that it is it's these complex adult issues written to a 7-year-old girl's emotional vocabulary.
Right.
But it doesn't skimp on any of this necessary, needful, important story stuff. It's just simple,
You look at the great, and this isn't, it's not new. It goes back to the beginning, especially in comics, but even in toys and stuff. When they're like, girls like Legos. How can we appeal to them? Let's make girl Legos. It's like, you do. That's an oxymoron. You already had them, and then you tried to sell them on a different product. That's insane. And, my comic is written for me, really. I'm my target demographic. If everybody hates it, I don't care. I love it. I think it's hilarious. And so, I was talking to someone that I was like, you just got to write it for yourself. I don't know. And you got to hope that there don't have to be a lot of people. Like if I sold 200 issues, that would blow my mind. I only need 200 out of 7 billion humans to think the way I do. I'm sure I can find some. But and I think that targeted audiences that ain't themselves, I would question whether most current writers in mainstream comics even care about what they're writing or actually like it. Like, do they take their comic and read it? Because I'll read mine and I'll laugh hysterically. And so, I think too much marketing and, people can blame politics and stuff, but I think it's more shallow than that. If selling Twinkies was all the rage, that would be what it was. They don't care. If they cared, that would be something. I'd actually applaud that. I'd say, yeah, you care passionately. You write what you care passionately about. I'm for that. Even if I disagree with it, I am for it. But I don't buy that. I don't think so. I think this is, they saw a fad. They saw that preteens and young teenagers liked this subject matter, and so they got some writers to trying to pander to them because their customer base is us, a bunch of old dudes. And it's
I think it's actually, and this is one thing. In a few weeks, I'm not sure exactly the date on it, but I'm going to have Matt Krotz and #1 Marmaduke fan back on to talk about manga and My Hero Academia specifically.
Yeah.
And one of the things about the manga market is that it is there's dozens of manga markets. They have them for young girls, they have them for young boys, they have them for teenagers, they have them for old men. I mean, they have they're targeted, but they're also not exclusionary, right? It's they specifically are saying, okay, we're going to tell these kinds of stories, and it's going to go, all the way around. And I think that's one of the things that American comics used to do.
Yeah.
But it hasn't done since, I don't know, the mid '80s.
Yeah, and
Something.
That's the thing that the Western market will. It's hard to say because we say what's wrong with the comic book industry. It's like, well, technically, it's doing fabulous, just not ours. Manga is thriving. People drawing stories is more popular now than it has ever been, ever. Just not specifically the ones we're drawing. We're rather unpopular, to be honest. And
that actually comes back to what I was talking earlier about your desire to just make stories down and dirty, underground style comics.
Yeah.
That's so much of the manga market is, that sort of a thing.
And, I wouldn't say I was I've ever been a big manga fan.
Mm-hmm.
Ever. Every time I show someone my art, a lot of times there's the comment of that exactly, that it has this deal. And I think it's merely, I do somewhat realistic proportions of humans with cartoon features, adult cartoon type idea, that I'm not making a weird chibi version of a character. In America, that is kind of the way, if you want to do cartoon, you suddenly make them this bizarre proportion thing. You can't hide them like...
Right, and that didn't used to be the way it was. And that's one of the projects I'm working on with Carl Toons. The reason specifically I wanted him to be on the project is because he's got this awesome style that weds mid-century Japanese early manga stuff with old Max Fleischer, Elsie Seeger kind of American cartooning.
Yeah.
And I'm doing I'm writing a superhero story for that style. I'm so excited.
Yeah, and
it's going to be good.
That's one thing that kind of made where I'm not worried about money just because I like, it's fun. And I think that's gone from a lot of the industry, I don't think it's fun for much people, when they get into the main editors and all that type of stuff. It's become a huge corporate thing because even though their comics aren't making any money, the movies based on them are making billions. And so the corporate suits are there, pretty hardcore. And how do I show art? Oh, hey, I've been drawing Mary Sue this whole time. It's horrible, though. It's a little creepy. Hold on.
Yeah, a little bit.
It kind of looks like a monkey. But the picture from the frame I picture is he does that. He draws her mouth this exaggerated deal. So I started there, and then I was like, oh, wow, she looks creepy as hell. But that's how most of my art goes. Hold on. I did have my iPad there just for that. Before you kick me off your show, God dang.
So Doug in the chat said it looks like we have the lead singer of Fish and the lead singer of the Doobie Brothers on.
I don't want to be the lead singer of either of those bands.
I also am not a big fan, although I have been compared to the guy from the Spin Doctors, but I'm not sure that's a compliment either.
Hold on. Okay. Oh, come on. Is that showing up?
Oh, yeah, that is.
There we go.
That's looking pretty good, man.
So far, so good. And of course, my Twitter has a shocking amount of this comic is just on my Twitter. I generally post any page just without words because.
And you're at the Tonic Mole, right?
Yeah, at the Tonic Mole. I'm also at Tonic Mole, but I'm never on that one. And yeah, so and I don't think I posted this one. It's the first page to the short that will be in issue number 1, and it tells the origin of Nora. I don't think that's focusing very well.
Super secret origin of Nora. That's awesome.
And so, okay, it kind of focused. And so, but everything's right on schedule for the Indiegogo.
Which will be the 13th of February.
February 12th.
The 12th.
Lincoln's birthday.
Ooh, fancy.
It's actually my birthday also. Because I was like, that'd be a great day, right? I kick my Indiegogo, get off and stuff. And so, yeah, and I'll probably kick off the Indiegogo, and then I'm going to kind of see where I'm at. If it goes pretty good, I'm going to hopefully 2 months later start with, see how I need to do it. Originally, the idea was, this was when I was more confident, like you ever get unrealistically confident about how good things are going to go? So yes. I was like, well, if I do my Indiegogo, I can just say, you Indiegogo this first issue, and then a Patreon from there on. And as it got closer, I was like, and at that time, I was like, should I do a Kickstarter and an Indiegogo? It's like, dude, you'll be lucky if you get one to work, let alone trying to push 2 campaigns.
So what's your goal is going to be for that? What's your minimum number since you're doing it yourself?
Probably 500.
Yeah. Okay.
Realistically, I thought that 500 shouldn't be a problem. The momentum is great. It's been going great. I'm very happy. Everything's looking better than I thought it would. And so I'm just doing a 500 goal because, in theory, my minimum print run, I think would be something around there. So I don't think it'll be a problem. I think originally I was looking at like $700 or something, and but I think that was 500 issues, which that won't. I'm thinking I just need a 200 print run, something like that.
Yeah.
Unless things go remarkably well, I go viral or something. But
always hope, right?
Hey, who knows? And so, but yeah, so yeah, I'm thinking 500. A part of me was kind of like, this is going to happen regardless. That 500 goal is more of, it's customary. I think everybody does it, but realistically, I want it to go no matter what. That is true. I'm gonna do that on my second issue with the Sashi cover and see if I can make it.
Yeah, I don't know. It almost, if you did a flexible spending and just like put it on there, that might be worth a joke.
A $1 million stretch goal. So
the $1 million stretch goal is to actually fly Sashi to America to draw the cover.
Right.
So anyway, but yeah. Well, man, we are way over, but that's okay. I really appreciate having you on, and we are gonna have you back.
Cool.
Time to have a knockdown drag out about Nightfall.
And I'm
with the Mattriarchy.
And it won't be too, because I'm conflicted. The story arc I think is great. It's it's kind of like the episode 1 through 3 of Star Wars. It's my favorite story of the Star Wars. Not so much my favorite movies. Execution is everything. So anyway, we'll fight about that.
Interesting thought. Okay. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and call the show. For those of you guys who stayed or tuned in later, I really appreciate it. As you heard during our top of the hour station identification, next week, Tim Lim, Mark Pellegrini talking about Common America. I'm very excited for that project, and it'll be Mark's first time on the show. I'm very much looking forward to having him. So Tim's been on twice, which I'm humbled at because I think his stuff is really, really good. Tonic, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, sir.
I really appreciated it. It's been a great conversation. You got to become a regular if you're up for it, man. This has been a real trip. So,
Yeah, we got plenty to argue about.
Oh my goodness, yes. and that's what makes for the good television.
That's right.
And all those the blood sports. That's what they want, right?
That's all people want. Give them what they want.
So anyway, we're going to go ahead and wrap it. Once again, chat, thanks for coming in. Had a real fun time, and always appreciate you guys chiming in. And we will see you all in a week. Have a great one. Loving comics.
Bye, everybody.